Good Saturday morning, everyone, and welcome into today's daily Bible reading for April the 8th. Today we are reading together, actually beginning a read together through the book of Numbers, being Numbers chapter 1 today. Thanks so much for taking time to read along with me today. Let me start off before we get into the read with just a few words concerning Numbers to help set the stage for what we are seeing here. Book of Genesis, if you know the origin of the word Genesis, it is, or the meaning behind the word Genesis, it is the beginning. Genesis tells us where everything came from and what brought us to where we are so far in the study. Began with mankind, and we see the failures of mankind, which moves God to select a special family of Abraham through which all the blessings would come, that they would grow into a great nation and have a great land, and through that great nation and land, the blessing would come to all the people of the earth. In order to bring about this great nation, the family ends up finding their way into Egypt, where they're able to grow, but eventually they are treated harshly. They call out to Yahweh, and Yahweh listens and hears them and delivers them in the book of the Exodus. Exodus shows how Yahweh saves his people from slavery, how he saves his chosen family from slavery. That moves us into the book of Leviticus, which tells us about what actually towards the end of Exodus, moving into Leviticus, we see Yahweh meeting with Moses on Mount Sinai and receiving the instructions concerning the Ten Commandments and the law that would bear his name. And in that, they are taught about how they can be in this covenant with Yahweh and what the covenant of Yahweh requires of them. Unfortunately, that covenant is broken even while Moses is still up on Sinai, yet it is reestablished very quickly, and they are told about the tabernacle and the priesthood in the rest of Exodus and Leviticus. And now we come to the beginning of Numbers, where we see these freed slaves putting Yahweh's holiness into action, living it out in their real life. So we have the beginning of Genesis, how they get into, how God's special family gets into Egypt. Exodus is how they exit out of Egypt. Leviticus is how they are to behave in a holy way as God's people. And now here in Numbers, we're going to see them putting that into practice as we go throughout this text. The first 10 chapters of Numbers, first 9 and some change of Numbers. About halfway through chapter 10, we see more instructions here at Sinai concerning various things they need to be aware of and they need to be ready to do. In the second half of chapter 10 through chapter 12, we see the traveling. We see them traveling from Mount Sinai going towards the wilderness of Paran. And unfortunately, there's going to be some complaining along the way, which gets them in trouble. Chapters 13 through 19, we see them in the wilderness of Paran, and it is during this time in which they refuse to enter the promised land, which causes a whole litany of issues. Chapters 20 and 21, there is more travel, and while they're traveling, there's complaining. There's even a major failure on the part of Moses. And then finally, chapters 22 through 36, we find the people in the plains of Moab, and we'll read about what takes place there. So first 10 chapters or so, there's some more instruction, but then we get much more into the narrative portion of the story once again. And we'll be considering that as we make our way through this text of Numbers over the next month or so. Again, I appreciate you tuning in today. Let me get the text of Numbers chapter 1 up on the screen for us, and we'll read along together. Numbers chapter 1 and verse number 1. Numbers chapter 1 and verse number 1, Yahweh spoke to Moses in the tent of meeting in the wilderness of Sinai on the first day of the second month of the second year after Israel's departure from the land of Egypt. Take a census of the entire Israelite community by their clans and their ancestral families, counting the names of every male one by one. You and Aaron are to register those who are 20 years old or more by their military divisions, everyone who can serve in Israel's army. A man from each tribe is to be with you, each one the head of his ancestral family. These are the names of the men who are to assist you. Eliezer, son of Shadur, from Reuben. Shelumiel, son of Shaddai, from Simeon. Nashon, son of Aminadab, from Judah, Nathanael, son of Zuar, from Issachar, Eliab, son of Helon, from Zebulun, from the sons of Joseph, Elishama, son of Amihud, from Ephraim, Gamaliel, son of Pedazur, from Manasseh, Abidan, son of Gideoni, from Benjamin, Ahiezer, son of Aminashadai, from Dan, Pagiel, son of Akron, from Asher, Eliasaph, son of Duel, from Gad. And finally, verse 15, Ahira, son of Enan, from Naphtali. These are the men called from the community. They are leaders of their ancestral tribes, the heads of Israel's clans. So Moses and Aaron took these men who had been designated by name, and they assembled the whole community on the first day of the second month. They recorded their ancestry by their clans and their ancestral families, counting one by one the names of those 20 years old or more. Just as Yahweh commanded Moses, he registered them in the wilderness of Sinai. The descendants of Reuben, the firstborn of Israel, according to their family records, by their clans and their ancestral families, counting one by one the names of every male 20 years old or more, every one who could serve in the army. Those registered for the tribe of Reuben numbered 46,500. The descendants of Simeon, according to their family records, by their clans and their ancestral families, those registered counting one by one the names of every male 20 years old or more, everyone who could serve in the army. Those registered for the tribe of Simeon numbered 59,300. The descendants of Gad, according to their ancestral records, by their clans and their ancestral families, counting the names of those 20 years or more, everyone who could serve in the army, those registered for the tribe of Gad numbered 45,650. The descendants of Judah, according to their family records, by their clans and their ancestral families, counting the names of those 20 years old or more, everyone who could serve in the army, those registered for the tribe of Judah numbered 74,600. The descendants of Issachar, according to their family records, by their clans and their ancestral families, counting the names of those 20 years old or more, everyone who could serve in the army, those registered for the tribe of Issachar numbered 54,400. The descendants of Zebulun, according to their family records, by their clans and their ancestral families, counting the names of those 20 years old or more, everyone who could serve in the army, those registered for the tribe of Zebulun numbered 57,400. The descendants of Joseph. Now, Joseph's going to include both Ephraim and Manasseh in his, because they received the blessing through through Jacob back at the end of Genesis. Verse 32, the descendants of Ephraim, according to their family records, by their clans and their ancestral families, counting the names of those 20 years old or more, everyone who could serve in the army, those registered for the tribe of Ephraim numbered 40,500. The descendants of Manasseh, according to their family records, by their clans and their ancestral families, counting the names of those 20 years old or more, everyone who could serve in the army, those registered for the tribe of Manasseh numbered 32,200. The descendants of Benjamin, according to their family records, by their clans and their ancestral families, counting the names of those 20 years old or more, everyone who could serve in the army, those registered for the tribe of Benjamin numbered 35,400. The descendants of Dan, according to their family records, by their clans and their ancestral families, counting the names of those 20 years old or more, everyone who could serve in the army, those registered for the tribe of Dan numbered 62,700. The descendants of Asher, according to their family records, by their clans and their ancestral families, counting the names of those 20 years old or more, everyone who could serve in the army, those registered for the tribe of Asher numbered 41,500. The descendants of Naphtali, according to their family records, by their clans and their ancestral families, counting the names of those 20 years old or more, everyone who could serve in the army, those registered for the tribe of Naphtali numbered 53,400. These are the men Moses and Aaron registered with the assistance of the 12 leaders of Israel, each representing his ancestral family. So all the Israelites 20 years old or more, everyone who can serve in Israel's army, were registered by their ancestral families. All those registered numbered 603,550. But The Levites were not registered with them by their ancestral tribe, for Yahweh told Moses, do not register or take a census of the tribe of Levi with the other Israelites. Appoint the Levites over the tabernacle of the testimony, all its furnishings and everything in it. They are to transport the tabernacle and all its articles, take care of it, and camp around it. Whenever the tabernacle is to move, the Levites are to take it down, and whenever it is to stop at a campsite, the Levites are to set it up. Any unauthorized person who comes near it is to be put to death. The Israelites are to camp by their military divisions, each man with his encampment and under his banner. The Levites are to come around the tabernacle of the testimony and watch over it, so that no wrath will fall on the Israelite community. The Israelites did everything just as Yahweh had commanded Moses. And that is Numbers chapter 1. Numbers chapter 1. All right, so starting off here with this text, we are noticing that the people are preparing to leave Sinai. If we go back to Exodus or Leviticus, the end of Leviticus, these are the commands that Yahweh gave Moses for the Israelites on Mount Sinai. That's the end of 27. The end of Numbers or Leviticus 26. These are the statutes and ordinances and laws the Yahweh established between himself and the Israelites through Moses on Mount Sinai. So they've received everything they need in order to go and to be what God would have them to be. So now they've received their instructions, it's time for them to now take off to go and see and to go toward the land that God is going to give them, so that they can now establish themselves within this land that God, again, is wanting to give them. As we think about this, we'll note that the very first thing to do, and the reason that this book gets the name that it gets, is by an inclusio that is structured within this particular book. And the book forms an inclusio at the front end with a census, at the back end with a census. So in these two sections, we have the numbers taken of the people. Now, the numbers focus on the military numbers of Israel. It's not every single person. It is only those who are males, who are 20 years older or more, and who are able to serve in the military. With this, we come to the total of 603,550, which is the same number we get in Exodus 38, and it's a pretty close number to what we get in Numbers chapter 26. Now, there's a lot of debate over the literalness of this number, whether it is to be taken literally or whether it's just a roundabout number. I don't want to get into that right now, but this simply shows us that at this point, this is a nation that has a very strong army. And yet, as we're going to see as we go throughout Numbers and Deuteronomy and more of the history of the people, they sometimes put more stock in their numbers than they did in the God who was really focusing on giving them the victory. We can think of some stories within the book of the Judges where God whittles down the army to show that he's the one who gives the victory. I believe it's Gideon that happens with, just to show them that you don't need a big army in order to accomplish what you need to accomplish. And yet still, what this shows us is the fact that God had kept his promise, and this was a mighty nation. It was a strong nation, and they would be able to fend for themselves. They were not, whenever others saw them, they did not just lick their chops thinking, oh, here's a nation that we can overcome very easily. But that did not include the Levites. The Levites were not included in this military census because their job was not to fight in the military. They had the religious role within the family of Israel, within the nation of Israel. And it was their duty to take care of the tabernacle. Whenever it was time to leave, remember, they're going to be a nomadic people here for a while. They've camped here at Sinai, let's see here, for about a year. The timestamp we get on the first day of the second month of the second year after Israel's departure from the land of Egypt. So they've been at Sinai for about a year now. And it's time for them to take off. But we're going to see chapters 1 through 10 take about 50 days. So we're beginning here. By the time we get to chapter 10, there's 50 days, another month and a half has passed. And now they're going to begin this march toward the promised land. Of course, to begin with, as I mentioned earlier, they're going to end up in the wilderness of Paran, and then all the bad things going to happen there. Unfortunately, they're going to take off wandering again. They're going to find themselves in the plains of Moab, and then we'll eventually get into Deuteronomy, where it's now time for Israel to enter back into the land. so that they can be where God wanted them to be originally. But again, to get ahead of ourselves a little bit, a generation needs to die off that did not have the faith that they needed to have. But Moses in Deuteronomy is going to preach to the people, really preach to them and stress to them their need for covenant loyalty, and what we've seen so far given to us in Exodus and Leviticus concerning the loyalty they needed to have to the covenant. So we're building our way towards there. But again, here in chapter 1, we see the namesake of the book, basically, where the census is given. And as we continue on into chapter 2, we're going to see the way that the camp was to be organized. I've got a really cool graphic here that I'll put up whenever we read that on Monday, because tomorrow we do not have a reading, but we will get back at it on Monday looking at Numbers chapter 2, but we'll see how exactly the camp was to be organized. Chapter 3, we're going to talk some more about the Levites. Chapter 4 is going to focus on the Kohathites. Whenever people were unclean in chapter 5, we get told about how that needed to be taken care of. We read about the Nazarite vow, there we go, in chapter 6. Chapter 7, some offerings are given from the leaders. Chapter 8, the tabernacle is lit. And then chapter 9, we see a Passover. Chapter 10, we see this time for them to set out actually on the journey. So again, chapters 1 through 10 covers about 50 days after they've already been at Sinai for about a year. And we're going to see them begin moving here in just a little bit. If you have any questions about the text here in Numbers chapter 1, not really a ton to discuss, since this is mostly just a census here within the text. But if you do have any questions, please feel free to leave us in the comment section below, and we'll discuss those things. Again, no reading tomorrow. We'll be back at it again on Monday. We'll be reading Numbers chapter 2 on Monday. So maybe if you're a little behind or need to catch up some, tomorrow will be a good catch-up day for you. Very much looking forward to seeing everybody tomorrow as we gather for our Bible classes and our worship assembly. Hope you're making plans to be there. Maybe invite a friend to join us this Sunday as we gather together for worship. We obviously would love to have new people visit with us and be our guests. They certainly have a place among us. And if you have a friend that you've been talking to about spiritual things, why not invite them to come join us if they're able on this Sunday. Again, have a great rest of your Saturday, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in today. Have a great rest of the day. We'll see everyone tomorrow for our Bible studies at 10 and our worship at 11. Take care and God bless.